Welcome to another episode of ET Catalyze, a program where we have deep and meaningful conversations with the change agents of marketing. With us today, we have some of the best and the sharpest brains in marketing. I'll introduce them together. To my right is Vivek Pandey of Times Internet. Thanks, Vivek, for joining us.
Pleasure.
To his right is Sonu. Sonu is an independent board member at various companies and a historian in family business. Thanks a lot, Sonu. I'm sure we'll have great conversations with you.
Thank you.
With us also, we have Rajesh from UiPath. Thanks, Rajesh, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And the man from the air, we have Debojo from SpiceJet. Thanks a lot, Debojo, for joining us today for this show. I'd like to start our conversation from a look back to the look ahead. From the days when some of you might have studied, the Philip Kotler School of Marketing, to where we stand today, how different or how similar is it? If I can start with you, Debojo.
Deepak, the essentials I feel are still the same. The fundamentals of marketing haven't changed drastically, but probably the means, the media mix over a period of last couple of decades have changed drastically. What you want to measure, how you measure it has changed considerably. The accuracy of your measurements. Data is playing a key role, and data has started playing a key role in the last 10 years, and probably now everything that you want to do instead of your gut feeling, you make data an enabler for taking decisions. And more so in the last 3-4 years, we have seen personalization and hyper-personalization playing a great role on what you do. Social mediums, social advocacy, how you build brands, and especially during the tough times, how you build brands, and how these advocates defend, discuss your brands in various social medias have completely changed. So from couple of decades, I feel that your media mix essentially has changed. The way you do your measurements have changed, but the essentials of marketing really hasn't changed.
But how does one measure impact, and how much of importance do you then lay on it?
See, again, I keep it very simple, saying the marketing, exists to help business make more money today, help make more money tomorrow, and secure money for day after tomorrow, right? So if you are connected to the business, and there are different means that you do, whether you're driving revenue, and therefore demand in a B2B business, funnel and sales opportunities, B2C business, maybe, shelf takeoff or, online takeoff, or you're driving brand. Now, there are various measures based on which medium you are using, what's the way to measure it, but, the reality stays the same.
Compared to how professionals run their company, marketing heads run their companies versus how family-run companies, lay importance on marketing. What is your experience saying? Do they go by gut emotion, or do they really look at too much of data? I mean, family-run companies.
Professionals tend to use a lot more data because if they use intuition and something goes wrong, it's very difficult for them to justify it. Family business owners, on the other hand, use a lot more of the intuition, and then they use data to justify their decision. And in case a decision goes wrong, which was based on intuition, well, nobody can ask them any questions. So to my mind, marketing, since we are dealing with a variety of people and we are trying to make them behave in a manner that we want them to, cannot be all data driven, because data is emotionless. You can use data to either enhance whatever your intuition is, or to get a contra to whatever your hypothesis is.
Vivek, you deal with massive amounts of data. Being an internet company, you get enough information. Even your clients, want so much of data to validate and cross-check, whether the efficacy of the medium that they have spent on. How and where do you see the role of data ahead also?
See, data, of course, we believe is like the layer that has sort of surrounded everything that was core to marketing. To your original question regarding Kotler and the way he defined marketing, I think Debojo put it very clearly that it all stays exactly the same. But yes, it has all gotten layered in a lot of data. So just because you can measure like thousands of things out there, you shouldn't get confused in all of that. clients or brands that demand that, of course, they get that, all the rich dashboards and data and everything. But we kind of try to insist to our business leaders as well as to the brands outside that focus on a narrow set of metrics that are of real value to your business. And I think then, of course, it all starts falling into place and making sense.
On the value to your business, when you're deciding the media metrics to use and also the mediums and the platforms to use, are there 2-3 clear defined parameters that you work on, or does it change from the medium or your plan or your objective?
So what we do is that we basically measure the outcome. What is the impact? What are the conversions? We measure only few of those matrices. And of course, what we try to do here is that the top of the funnel, we try and keep it significant and narrow, and not make it as broad as a lot of other marketing-based companies would want their brand to be, or probably to create awareness. Because of course there are some mediums which will create awareness for you and without any cost. Let's say you're a display network, a Google display network, or for example, if we do something with ET or Times for that matter, if you don't click on it, I also don't have to pay for it. So of course it generates some additional awareness. But beyond that, we don't want to keep the top of the funnel too wide, because then it would reach to unnecessary, you have to spend a lot. We want to keep it narrow, we want to keep it significant.
Your product, UiPath, is marketed towards a very B2B centric clients. How do you go about selling your solutions?
From a brand perspective, in a B2B, typically, it's a longer term relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. It's higher value, therefore risk is higher. So people actually like to do business with people they trust. Therefore, a big corporate brand is very, very important, because it's a very trust-based relationship. Typically in B2B, you don't have multiple sub-brands. You have a corporate brand. Again, the line of distinction between the company, the founder, and the top leadership is thin, because people are looking for who are they doing business with and what's the overall purpose of the corporation, which they identify with and feel comfortable doing business with.
At the core of it, the marketing is to the human. You've had enough experiences with multiple brands and sit on many boards. What is your take on this? How do you appeal to the human?
So I don't think there's a template that applies to all humans, because by nature everybody is different. I mean, for example, today we talk of targeted marketing through digital. But I remember 35 years ago, I used to stay in a hostel, and there was one of our friends who was very popular amongst the girls because he used to get these Mills and Boons novels. And you guys may not know, but girls of a certain age really liked the Mills and Boons novels.
Guys know a lot about
Guys
it.
know. So what Lakme used to do was to take they used to have advertising in Mills and Boons novels, like stick on between the cover and the front, the first page, they used to have a product advertising. Now I thought, now that I look back at it, I think it was excellent form of niche marketing. Today maybe Lakme uses digital media to reach out to a certain aged women, but 35 years ago Lakme had figured out a way to reach out to its target group of audiences. So means available to a company or a product may change, but the objective remains the same. What do you want to convey? To whom do you want to convey?
Does the messaging or the method change if the human is in front of a TV screen versus a newspaper versus a digital screen? Does the tone messaging change?
Of course, certainly. I think it most certainly changes, and I think that is the biggest challenging facing the advertising industry today. See, everybody talks about this marketing to one, targeting and personalization, and technology allows you to do that today, that this guy is reading this or watching this, so you show him this ad. But I think everybody is missing the media in between. So it's almost like a cross matrix where you can target to individual consumers basis their interest, but the message that is going in every media is pretty much the same. An ad in print is very different from an ad in video, and is very different from an ad in digital. Even within digital, now you have so many specialized apps, like you have your food app, and you have your music app, and you have your video app. The consumer is in a very different mindset when he is using these apps. And you can't do it today for all your audiences and all the media, because that becomes a humongous combination to handle. pick your top 3-4 sort of TGs, pick the top 3-4 media that you will be in. But at least for these sort of 16-20 combinations, have a very specific strategy, have a very specific creative, you have to work very hard towards your marketing today. Pick up, let's say you're advertising on a food app and you are targeting say millennials in tier 2 cities. That will be a very specific campaign, very different from your other campaigns.
On the marketing for many in the airline business, obviously you're trying to appeal to the entire masses. And there are multiple levers. Sometimes you'll use the brand leverage, sometimes it will be the price leverage. When you've done that in the marketing for many, what do you think works best?
What digital has allowed us is to experiment and is to what we call as A/B testing. Then there are multivariate testing. You can do a lot of it. So what we do is that if we have to start a television campaign, we did a television campaign with we don't do television extensively, but whenever we do, what we do is that we test those campaigns in print first. If we let's say have 3-4 variations of a audio visual or let's say a TVC, we would rather test it in digital, find out what is working best in our TG and then float it. And a lot of these companies, nothing new, this has been going on for quite some time now, and people are doing that. It helps them to understand which creative is working better. Similarly, now when we do any be it let's say if we have to market a new ancillary product. So if there are campaigns, there are multiple campaigns. There's not one campaign. You do a A/B testing that okay, for this particular audience, let's say for a female of 20 to 40 or 20 to whatever is your core audience, this campaign A is working better. Then you take up campaign A. But the challenge is how do you produce, let's say for one such campaign or one such generic campaign, you may have to produce let's say 60-70 creative. At times it becomes really challenging.
On the marketing for one, since you've also been in the private wealth management space, which emotional button would you press on?
So I don't think that the emotional button goes away whether you're marketing to many or marketing to one, but in a bespoke model, say private banking or bespoke tailoring, your ingredients remain the same. It's basically how you use them to pitch it to the person who's in front of you. But it's for me to figure out what is your need, what appeals to you, and then using the ingredients that I already have to quickly create a little dish out of it and pitch it to you. When I'm pitching to one, which is marketing to one, I have the luxury of being able to do that. But when I'm doing it to many people, I have to decide largely these are the people that I want, and based on a lot of data, a lot of hypothesis, I say these are the features that are most likely to appeal to them, and therefore I will go out and talk only of features A, B and C.
Rajesh, is there a place for emotion when you're marketing in B2B and that to a tech audience which is so binary? They look at 0, 1s and then they take the call.
Absolutely. Actually, more than one ever imagines. And because people are eventually trying to make these big decisions, they have their professional success involved, they have their personal image involved, they have their career success involved. You can imagine a tech leader does one botched $1 million investment and implementation, their career is over. So risk is very high, right? So everybody wants a personal payoff from the decision that they make. So that's what I said, the trust is very important, relatability is very important. In fact, there is a very interesting pyramid of hierarchy of needs when people look at B2B decisions. In the very first level, they look at sort of basic table stakes, the product does what they need it to do. Then they go to the functional layer, they probably compare with all options in the market, say this is a comparable or in the top consideration set. Then they go to, in B2B case, ease of doing business, very important, because from financial transaction, all transactions are complex, people want to do business which is easy. Then the next level is sort of individual payoff. Does it drive their career? Is this implementation going to look good on their resume? Does it make them look like a thought leader? And then they go to the higher purpose. Are they actually using, for example, in our case, technology to make the world a better place? Does the company have a higher purpose which they identify with?
Debojo, your company bought the brand and then you had the onerous task of reviving it, building consumer confidence. How did you go about doing it?
This was about 5 years back when Mr. Singh took over from the Marans, and December 16th was the day when airline operations were almost shut, and that's when he infused some capital to start the operations again, because if an airline is shut for few days, it's very difficult to revive the operations from there. So the initial challenge, of course, was to get back that trust, get back that confidence, because of course we had spoiled holiday plans of thousands of people during that peak holiday period. So what we did after 4 months, I think we came back, and we came back well. From April onwards, we have been maintaining the highest load factor in the country, and it's a sort of world record that we have been doing this for the past close to 5 years, 4.5 years now, 54, 55 months, and we have maintained your occupancy of more than 90% now for close to 55.
Did you have to take very tough calls?
So
we
had to, because see what happened the moment we reached that 90%, we started communicating that look, the country loves to fly with us, and there we used print extensively. We used large format ads to announce that. Then we worked on our on-time performance, because the deliveries, everything got completely haywire. So we got back quickly on that front. Our operations, our engineering people, they did extremely well to get back to the OTP, to the fact that we became number 1 and number 2 in on-time performance very soon. I think 5-6 months after we restarted our operations. So we announced that, we communicated that very well, using large format ads and doing extensive. We did some extensive campaign in digital also.
So it's essential to keep communicating time and again in multiple formats.
Because if you communicate now, it's important to to meet your short-term objectives, but then you have your long-term objectives, and we had our long-term objectives that we need to come back. Of course, that period was very challenging to keep going, but we thought that this will help us, and it helped us to in terms of our load factors, in terms of our OTP, and we communicated that well, and we got back the response from the customers.
So if I can come to you, while in his case, he had the same name and same brand. In your experience, when you switched from UTI to Axis, how was that experience, and how do you go about doing it?
So we didn't switch. I didn't switch from UTI to Axis. It was just that the name changed.
Transition happened.
Transition of the name happened, and as the ad went at that time, everything's the same except the name. But it's very interesting, from a marketing point of view. UTI Bank, even though it wasn't a government bank, always had the perception of it being a government bank. And so much so that when I left a private bank, ING, and joined UTI Bank, my mother-in-law was most upset, because she thought that I had fallen upon bad times and that I had to join a government bank. But when we changed from UTI to Axis Bank, there was a different perception within a few years about the bank. The people were the same, the work that we were doing was the same, but suddenly the perception went up. And as our chairman joked when we changed the name, he said all your CV values have gone up, because as UTI Bank, we were like the dregs in the recruitment market, but as Axis Bank, suddenly we were more oomphy. So the brand Axis, we actually, while we were more with it, we had to spend an inordinate amount of time to tell our customers and potential customers that the trust that you associated with UTI is the same with Axis, because UTI had a lot of...
Was it supposed to be the same, or you had to repose more faith and more trust?
People thought that bank big gaya hai, koi multinational bank ne aake le liya hai. And UTI had all the associations of stability and trustworthiness of a public sector bank, and Axis, we had to tell them that everything is the same except the name. That was the tagline. So we did have to work extra hard to tell them that, please, that trust that you have with the old brand, transfer it to the new brand. And actually, the on-ground delivery didn't change, because everything was indeed the same, and therefore it did not take much time for that trust to be transferred on to the new brand.
Already in the latest Group M report, digital as a medium in India itself has beaten print. How do you use digital per se? Do you use it with lots of metrics and data, or now does that not even bother because that's sine qua non, I mean, that's part of you?
I feel that print and television will coexist with digital for some time to go. The bottom of the pyramid is still evolving, and I feel that both print and digital will be there for at least for the next decade or so. Having said that, digital is a medium which opens up a lot of matrices for measurements. You can measure 10 different parameters that you want, but 20, 30 for that matter. And what it matters at the end of the day is that whether it is meeting the objectives of your business or not. And I think that's why your measurement should be narrow, and you should measure what you want, what really the outcome is, and then accordingly take it forward if you want to invest more on that medium or not.
Sonu, your experience at digital marketing?
So digital is a channel that is going to see incremental spends. But this term that somebody coined or somebody used very interestingly is called accidental collision, which happens on the pages of newspapers and magazines. That I may not be interested in a new car, I may not be interested in a new product. And because I've not searched for it, I'm not that profile, digital marketers are not going to target me. But if I'm flipping through a newspaper or a magazine and I come across an ad, accidental collision, it may just generate that need in me to go out and then search for the product and then have the digital guys, reach out to me.
That's an interesting thought, because I mean, no one earlier, people were so obsessed with targeted that the accidental is the loss.
It is a complete loss. So when we were growing up, I mean, as students, there was a felt need, there was a latent need, and there was an articulated need. Now the latent need is a need that I don't know I have, and if I don't know I have it, how can my digital, how would they know that I have it? But through the accidental collisions, I may actually, that latent need is a felt need, which forces me to go to the digital platforms and look for it, which then enables the digital guys to reach out to me. So it's a complete circle of life, as we say.
Rajesh, does machine learning have a place to discover the accidental learning?
See, machine learning learns on the basis of experience, right? So it will observe you. So even when you discover accidentally, and the data exists to support it, it will. It will.
But you need that accidental collision first.
And she made an interesting point. We've seen it in our own experience. As you can imagine, we are narrow focus on the enterprise, buyers in the country, and we put out a full page cover ad. And a lot of accidental collisions. Employees came back and said, now my family knows which company I work for. Suddenly my peers know what do I do for a living. So there are a lot of these. I think they are also brand building for your employees, for a broader set who may not necessarily be consuming what you do.
So from the days of spray and pray marketing to targeted to accidental collision, it's been a host of terms we picked up today on the learning from the marketing. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sure our viewers will find it much more useful. Thanks a lot for all your
Thank you.
Thank you,
for having
Deepak.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, viewers, and watch out for our next episode.